I say to people all the time, we're going to go through 5 more GFCs or the equivalents in our lives. And we just recently had the equivalent of a GFC just last year. Great. We know they're going to happen. We just don't know when they're going to happen. How are you prepared?
In this episode of The Little Black Book, I'm joined by Tony Catt. Tony Catt is the CEO and Director of Catapult Wealth. Established in 2011, Catapult Wealth challenged the traditional way financial advisors engage with and charge their clients. With over 2 decades of experience, Tony has seen many changes in the financial markets. He uses these experiences to establish tailored frameworks to educate and help families achieve their financial objectives and lifetime goals. In this episode, Tony talks about his role as a leader and the need to be vulnerable and genuine with your team in order to engender trust. He describes how his frustration with the financial planning and advisory industry led him to challenge the status quo and establish a different model of business. He discusses and describes the role his father and broader family have played in being mentors to him and the role models for his own development. He speaks about the importance of understanding and embracing diversity in your team and how effective communication frameworks can help eliminate assumptions in governance and operating structures. Welcome to The Little Black Book, a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs who provide their first-hand experiences to help others learn and grow. This podcast is brought to you by Altitude Advisory. Altitude Advisory is a modern business advisory firm helping business owners build a better business for a better life. Favourite movie of all time?
Yeah, it was really a toss-up for me, Andrew, of a couple of different movies that have had an impact on me. The first one was Remember the Titans, which I think you all know very well. Probably watching that movie with my sporting background, really passionate about building a team. And how they went around putting people together that came from different backgrounds and cultural backgrounds and through a time that was obviously very tough in history. So, and adversity, I think, is probably what stands out for me in that movie. The second one really is for me is Moneyball, which sings to my baseball history. But more importantly, what I get out of Moneyball is challenging the status quo. You know, people, they went in and they said, you know, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. And they walked in and went, no, we're not doing it this way anymore. You know, it's a ticket to nowhere. We have to be different. And I just, the way, because it's true too, like it's a true story, and the way they went about it and the way they challenged old practices, I love that movie. I love it for all those reasons.
Yeah. And I think there's some really great messaging in both those movies. And like you, I love both those movies. And the number of times I've watched both of them. But you're right. In terms of the lessons, though, and, you just mentioned about building a team and the diversity with the different racial backgrounds in Remember the Titans, and then, the different way of doing business in money. What have you taken out of those, and how do you, I guess, apply them in day-to-day business for Catapult Wealth?
Yeah, well, obviously, just seeing probably the Remember the Titans one, building a team. You'll get sick of my cliches today, Andrew, but if you want to go alone, like if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that whole principle is, I could be a sole practitioner running Catapult Wealth, and I could work with a very small team and probably go pretty fast. But if you wanted to build what we wanted to build with Catapult Wealth and the broader Hub 39 group, we couldn't do it on our own. And therefore, being able to put a team together, realizing that there are different people from different backgrounds with different opinions, but at the same time, still having a North Star and still being able to say, hey, this is where we want to go, which they did in Remember the Titans. And things are going to go wrong, which they went through, is really what I took out of that and how I've applied it to Catapult Wealth. Moneyball more around is, really when we started Catapult Wealth and said, well, 10 years ago, and we wanted to do things a different way, was challenging the status quo. It was really straight off the bat. And that's why and not being afraid to do that, because and people have he got knocked a fair bit, and people said it didn't work straight away, and people, think, oh, well, you're an idiot. But being able to challenge that, and that's what we did with the business, and ultimately sticking through that course, and even going to places like we set up the office at Tumby Bay, we've set up the office in Tintinara, and other people go, no, it's too hard and you can't do that. They've been really successful.
Yeah, cool. What about a book that as a child or a young adult had a real effect on you, and why?
I gave this a lot of thought, this question, and
because you read a lot.
I know I do read a lot, and my wife will laugh when she probably hears this, in the sense that she'll think, how out of that massive bookshelf that you've got all those books, you're going to pick one book. The book that got the most out of, believe it or not, is not on my bookshelf.
Right.
It was Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, okay.
The kill the pig, cut his throat. Again, it was just reading that and seeing reading when I was very young about human behavior and tribal behavior and survival and what groups can do with certain things. And when I reflect, I do remember that book very vividly, and it just, how sometimes you just live in the book. That book had a massive impact on me, and at times it scared me, but other times I walked away going, this is a really good insight into human behavior.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tony. I'm learning a bit more about just how you're wired here, and I definitely want to circle back into a bit more of this behavioural. I'll call it behavioural sciences.
Yeah,
which you got a real passion or curiosity for, and then the application then in business as well. What about a travel experience, mate? That was has been really transformative, and is there any reasons why it is so?
Look, it was probably the real easy one here and I apologise once again to my family here for all the travel trips we've done, which I do remember fondly. But transformative was certainly my first, I'll call it my real first international trip, which at the end of year 12, I went overseas to New Zealand with my best friend at the time, Shane, and Shane and I basically started in Auckland, and for 5 weeks worked all our way down through New Zealand, down through to Queensland, and then back up to Christchurch. And that trip opened my eyes up to the fact there is the world. I mean, I know, and New Zealand is not the world, but when your first overseas trip, and it just opened my eyes up and saying, you know what? There is a lot of different experiences out there that you've got to go be open to and look for. Just being able to do something really cool like that with a good people as well was really good fun.
Was there any particular moment or reflection or experience on that trip that really, you look back on and go, well, do you know what, this was a real, career defining or life defining moment?
That's a good question. I think that there was one time where we were sitting at the bottom, for anyone listening and who ever been to Queenstown, there's a thing called the Milford Sound, and the Milford Sound has a walk you do for 4 days where you put a backpack on, and there's a group of you that have to walk, and myself, Shane and his parents, who they're all we were 18-year-olds at that time, and you would suggest that we thought we were probably physically fit, but there had been massive rainfall the 2 days prior to us leaving. And they basically gave us a choice where they said the first hut had been washed out. So the first day's walking where you would stop and stay the night had been washed out. And then they said you can either leave, but you got to walk 2 days in one, push through to the second hut, or you're not going. Mm-hmm. And I remember just sitting down there with his family and saying, well, what do we do? Do we want to be in? Do we want to be out? And I remember just seeing particularly, Shane's parents and just say, no, this it was like a legitimate, what even are you talking about? Well, of course we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to give this a red hot crack. We think they backed themselves in and said, you guys are in this with us and we're going to smash this. And just that, and we did it. And it was exhausting and it was tiring but geez, it was rewarding.
Yeah.
Like that whole message around, in terms of me, just the journey and doing something really hard and then enjoying the spoils of what's really hard was really important for me.
But it also sounds like, just from that your friend's parents, Shane, it took a real leadership role there.
100%.
And said, okay, well, look, let's get in this together. Yeah. It's not going to be easy, but we'll dig in. We'll get through it as a group, which is kind of then comes back to some of your philosophies, presumably in business as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's they could have hummed and hard, and as soon as you saw potentially for me at that time, if I saw an element of weakness in them, or they might have been a bit scared, or you might have gone, oh no, this I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But there wasn't that feeling. There was just like, you know what?
Let's get in.
We'll get in and we'll get it done.
Yeah, cool. That's a great story. Mate, you had for a long time, you started off as an accountant, and as you've said, you saw the light after a couple of years and got out and then had a I guess a long career in stockbroking. And then in 2011, you decided, well, this is no longer for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out into public practice or set up your own business with Catapult Wealth. What was the real trigger for you to say, well, I no longer want to be effectively an employee or whatever. I want to go and create my own thing. What was the driver and the trigger?
Yeah, well, look, it's an interesting one, Andrew. I mean, there was, I think it was a combination of events in a sense that I came from a family where both mum and dad ran their own practices. So mum was a florist and owned her own business and had made the jump into that land and ran a very successful florist shop. And dad had grown up and then had run a very successful patent trademark firm. And I'd seen them put their stamp on the world in a way, in a very small way, but they said, this is who I am, this is what I represent. And the impact, the mum less so because she didn't really have a lot of staff, but mum had a certain vision, a certain way that she wanted to do things in the floristry world, and dad had a certain vision, a certain way that he wanted to do things in the patent trademark world, and particularly from dad, the way he treated people when he treated his team, I got a lot out of. And I think, you sort of have that now or never moment where, and I call it my Jerry Maguire moment, where I walked out with, worked out with the PA and a goldfish, but that moment where it just felt right. It was the right time. Yourself, Andrew, Jared down in Van Dyke Newbold, Jared had come and spoken to me. So some of our good friends had said, this is, you guys had a certain shared vision around what the world wanted to look like. And that combined with my frustrations around the industry and my frustrations around culture and other things, it just, sometimes the stars align, mate, I probably was at a time in my life, which I'll reflect on, where, dad had died 3 or 4 years previous to that, to me walking out and starting up my own practice. But it was time to be challenged again. It was time to, I'd gone back into comfort mode. I'd gone back into a mode where, I'd gone through the motions. You turn up, you feel like a bit of a hamster on a wheel. It was time to be challenged.
You just mentioned your dad there, and I know you two were really close and was a real role model for you. And you just mentioned there he passed away quite early in life. He's only in his mid-50s.
57, yeah.
How much do you think that key event in your life impacted then? You saying, well, if my old man was still alive, what would he tell me to do, and would he push me? And this, I can sit here and pedal this way, but that's not the counsel or the advice or whatever that I would have got from your dad.
Yeah, it's interesting. Dad used to call me in school Mr. 80%. So he always knew that I was. He knew when I was cruising, and he knew I could get away with it. And therefore, he really challenged me to say, can you be a better version of yourself in a sense? And what's the best version of yourself, really? And they were words that I think I'd gone back to being Mr. 80% a little bit for a while there. And I think he would have challenged me to say, don't die wondering, give it a crack. And you just never, you might be surprised at how much you can achieve sort of attitude. So the Mr. 80% thing would have been definitely his advice, in sense, don't be that guy.
Yeah. Mate, I want to circle back to what we were talking about, like to start with, the remember the Titans, the team bit, Lord of the Flies, and this behavioural dynamics, or this culture piece. And I know you've done a fair bit of work with Daniel Healy from leading teams, and I know it's your baseball or your community involvement. Tell me about how that all works for you. What have you managed to do inside your own team? How do you connect with your people? How do you stay relatable? All those sort of things. What's some of the key frameworks that you've worked on to help develop your people?
I think that probably the key moment for me is figuring out who we are firstly as individuals. So Probably a key moment is dad passing away, and you stop and you have time for reflection about what's important, what's not, what matters to you, what doesn't matter to you, what truly makes us tick. And, I say you can't lead others until you can lead yourself. And so really just taking control of myself was step one. And once I felt like I had a really good handle on what I did or didn't stand for and how I wanted to be perceived, you can then be genuine. You don't, I talk, other people, I do, and Andrew, you've heard me use the phrase, fake it till you make it some days, but at the end of the day, you can't fake culture for very long anyway. You can't, it'll come across eventually as disingenuine, but more importantly, pretending to be something you're not is exhausting. It wears you out. You'll fry. Yeah. And so not only are you trying to fool other people, you're fooling yourself, and you will blow up. Yeah. And so, being something you're not in whatever capacity is hard work. So figuring out who you are, what you stand for first and foremost, but then probably creating clear messages to the team was really crucial for me. And Andrew, that I'm probably pretty big on storytelling. I love telling stories. Half of them, you might say, Tony, they're half of them true. Well, I'll let everybody guess whether some of my stories are true or not. I won't give away my secrets. But becoming relatable in a sense was being able to be vulnerable, being able to tell stories about your own life. And I use the phrase quid pro quo. I'll tell you something about me if you tell me something about you. And people are more inclined to open up, particularly in an industry that I'm in where, we're trying to win trust very quickly. Yeah. We have to get in and talk about some really private, personal matters with clients very quickly. And some clients really struggle to talk about their personal finances, let alone other relationship or emotional or goal-setting issues. Yeah. And getting them to have a persona that they can trust and winning that trust is really crucial. And so being relatable is important in our industry and therefore, but it has to be genuine. You can't, I keep coming back to that. You can't make it up. And as I said, you can do it for a little while, but so I hope that gives you some idea of how my mindset around it is. You've got to be, I hate the words true to yourself. I mean, that doesn't resonate with me, but being genuine does. Yeah, cool. It's really interesting how you just describe it, about being relatable to clients and being able to tell stories and I guess put yourself out there and be vulnerable to get their trust. I must imagine that when you're first meeting with clients, and that can also be potentially exhausting as well, where you might be telling a story and you're trying to get something back from the other side of the table to get somebody, to only really be able to help them, you need to know what you need to help them with. Yeah. And to be able to get that information out, I'm sure can at times be challenging for you. Yeah, it is. And it is, it doesn't always work, mate. I mean, some people hold their cards very close to their chest and that's okay. That I don't see, I'm not offended by that. I think people need to go at their own pace is probably what I relate back to, is saying that, whether it takes 1 hour, 3 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours or 2 years to try and work out what clients want and how they want to communicate or who they truly are and what they really want out of the relationship with financial planning and so on. There's no stopwatch on it. Like, there's no clock on it. Like, we don't charge by the hour as well. So, it takes what it takes. Yeah. And everyone seems to be, I don't know, everyone seems to be in so much of a hurry to get everywhere these days. Some things just take time. And I think that we've just got to give ourselves a break around that. So I don't get offended by that. Or it's emotionally, it's hard, but eventually that's where the gems come from. Yeah, cool. Over your journey, aside from COVID-19, which we all know, we saw the market tank, I suppose March, April, 2020. Yeah. You've been through, numerous ups and downs over your careers with GFCs and airline crises and SARS and now COVID, all these sort of things. Yeah. Tech booms. Yep. That can be an emotional roller coaster for clients, and I presume
most of the time you get the phone calls is when things are blowing up, not when they're not ringing up to tell you that you're doing a good job.
No.
So how do you manage through those challenges with people?
Yeah, you do. COVID's a great example recently where you do go a little bit into counselling mode. In fact, a lot into counselling mode. But for me, and this is hard, you've got to acknowledge the emotion because these things come with emotion, and money creates emotion, which is because money creates different emotions and means different things to different people. And that's a whole nother topic for another day. But it's actually acknowledging the emotion, recognizing it. But then I don't want to say stripping it out, but then coming back to why the goal. What were the goals originally? Come back to your purpose. Why did we invest this money? What was the end game? What were we trying to do here? How long were we intending to invest it for? Were you doing it for an income stream? What were the goals? And when you take clients back a step, then you can stop and breathe. And I also talk to clients a bit about action and reaction and trying to create a gap.
Yeah.
Emotionally, just where you take a step out and try and think for a while, because I don't even know, I'm no brain surgeon, but which part of the brain takes over, but it's not a good part of the brain that takes over decision making during times like that. But
that fight or flight response.
Yeah, our job is create the gap. Our job is to put some sense in a nonsensical world, and I talk to us about being sense makers a lot. That's what's got us through. But more importantly, on top of that, Andrew, I think what's got us through a lot of those crises is so focusing on the goals, but having risk management strategies. I talk even, for example, about clients having water tanks. Have water tank A, water tank B, cash, availability, when do you need it? And unfortunately, for clients that have listened to me over the years, I say to people all the time, we're going to go through 5 more GFCs or the equivalents in our lives. And we just recently had the equivalent of a GFC just last year. Great. We know they're going to happen. We just don't know when they're going to happen. How are you prepared?
Yeah.
And how are you going to react? And that's what gets me through. It's what gets the clients through. It's really important to have people in your life you can talk to and these risk management strategies you can rely on.
But by the sounds, investing or financial planning is no different than everyday life. Yeah. The reality is that you want to go somewhere, you got some goals, some objectives or whatever, but it's never a straight path. There's always going to be twists and turns or potholes or speed bumps that can trip you over or upset the smooth journey on the way through. So this, by the sounds, is no different.
No, 100% it's not. And again, what is also no different, Andrew, is that some people risk manage life, I should say, and some people don't.
Yeah.
And some people talk a bit about, they worry about the what ifs, which is, and some people don't. And again, I use the phrase, let's close the back door, because growth is great and everyone wants to get ahead at the time and they're risk takers and that, but they don't close the back door. And who knows going to get in your back door at any time. And sometimes you got to stop, breathe, do an audit on your life and say, hang on, have I closed that back door or not? And I think that's a really important conversation to have.
Yeah, cool. Interesting question without notice. I was posed this question not long ago myself, and I'm curious to hear your response. Somebody gives you an envelope, and inside that envelope, it's a sealed envelope. Inside that envelope is written your date of death.
Yes.
Do you open the envelope or do you close it or leave it closed?
It's a really good question, Andrew, and I'm going to answer it by telling a story that you may have told already on this podcast. I don't know, but one of the crucial moments in my life was when you and I listened to a fantastic guy called Dan DePani, a monk in New Zealand, and he stood up on stage and got us to write down our date of death at that seminar. And we were in a room full of accountants and financial planners, I think, at that day in New Zealand, and you and I both had to sit next to one another and wrote it down. And even looking around the room that day and seeing how confrontational that even that moment was, and then not only that, then getting the Dan party, getting us to switch it into a countdown clock on our life was confrontational, and it flicked a switch in my head to say, make every moment count. And if I even had a personal trademark at the moment, it would sound something like that. It is something that I have never forgotten. I I would love to know the day I'm going to die, because in a sense I recreated that by that moment by saying, hey, we're not on this planet forever. Don't behave like you're on this planet forever. Make every moment count.
Don't take anything for granted.
I'd want to know.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I answered, I sort of flipped and flopped, and I said to the guy that asked me, I said, that's irrelevant to me, because whether I know or whether I don't know
shouldn't change.
Doesn't change how I behave.
Yeah.
So
I think it did when we did that exercise. Yeah. I think I behaved in a way which thought time was never going to stop. But cool. I think that switch went off.
Thanks for sharing, mate. Mate, you've got a real passion for succession planning, and particularly with farmers and with rural clients. So much so that you've even got your own podcast regarding that.
Yeah.
Mate, you're a city boy.
Yeah.
Born and bred in the city.
No, Crayfors. So that's rural.
It's not rural. For those of you that are listening that don't know where Crayfors is, it's literally 5-minute drive out of the CBD of Adelaide. How did you get into dealing with farmers, and what is your love of the sector, or the love of the people? Where does that come from?
Yeah, look, it is, for me, it's really interesting. Meeting Lisa, my wife, my good wife, and she's a Renmark girl, and her fantastic family. Her dad moved to Australia, to Paringa from LA in, I think I'm going to say approximately 1970, so 50-something years ago, and set up a farm in Paringa, citrus, grapes, and seeing how farming families operated and from the inside out, and watching some of the discussions that they needed, and their family was big on succession and intergenerational wealth and governance around that, and it really opened my eyes up to such a fantastic family that really cared about this stuff, and by no means was any of it easy, by the way, for that family, and I hope they don't mind me saying, but at the same time, I was on the flip side of that, coming across retiree clients in the farming sector around South Australia particularly, that were not dealing with that very well, and they weren't getting really great help around it. Remember, so Lisa and I got married 21 years ago. So this is at a time when I said, who is helping these people? Is it their accountants? Is it their financial planners? Is it their stockbrokers? Is it their bankers? Is it their lawyers? And the answer to that was, at the time, none of them, in essence. And I went, all right, I really want to help this sector. Yeah. I really... a switch went off in my head, and I went away and did a family business advisory course, become an accredited family business advisor, have done a coaching course, which, you and I both went away and did a life coaching course, which was part of the planks of putting in the skill set for me to be able to deal with succession planning.
Yeah. It's interesting that, you rewind the clock, and I'm curious as to, explore how this has changed a little bit. The old days of succession planning was somebody would come in and say, well, I need to do a succession and plan, and the accountant or the insurance agent would write up a 10-page report and say, well, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
And inherently it would sit in the top drawer and never get action because it was never connected.
Yeah.
Now, I know you've spoken about families and individuals even in farming families being part of a team as well.
Yeah.
Now, this whole connection about goals and understanding what the future frameworks look like, it's all part of the same jigsaw puzzle, from what I can understand.
Yeah.
So how then do you take those frameworks and apply them across what is generally been a pretty, I'll call it, traditional sector?
Yeah, it is, and it is. It's certainly not easy, but even the saying around, I say, just because you share the same last name doesn't mean you should be in business together. And just understanding that people, unfortunately, in families, we take each other for granted. We don't attempt to, we assume relationship depth. We assume that we're all going to be there for each other all the time. And they're probably, at some level, they're probably great assumptions to make. But what you learn from other parts, and I'll call it from some of the other directions that I've been in, is that they can be really dangerous assumptions, and you need to continue to work on relationships, whether you got the same last name or not. And if you want to be in business together, you need depth of relationship and trust, and effectively an internal belief in one another that you come from a good place, and you're all swimming in the same direction. And people go into business together they just, again, make some assumptions around people's values. They make some assumptions that just because you have the same last name, you're going to have a similar set of values about your work ethic or how you approach certain decisions, or it's a really bad assumption. And you have also some assumptions that my goals are going to be like your goals about where your kids go to school or the house you want to live in, or anything. Again, really dangerous.
And what do they say? Assumptions make an ass out of you and me.
100%. And people, I don't know, the traditional part of it, Andrew, is really interesting, because the traditional part is poor communicators. They're poor at expressing themselves. They're poor at getting into emotional conversations. They're poor at having, as Hills would say, genuine conversations. And that's fine. But so therefore, taking some of these families through that journey to have those conversations is hard, and it is dangerous some days.
Yeah.
But if you want to get to where you want to go, you've got to go through this pain.
There's no easy path.
Nah.
No, cool. You set up Catapult Wealth 2011, and this is where I circle back to the money ball.
Yes.
You had a vision for what you wanted Catapult Wealth to look like.
Yep.
Including setting up your own, charitable foundation DGR that sits alongside of it.
Yep.
Tell me, how have you gone about setting that up? How important is that community engagement, been for you in terms of living out your values or delivering what you want to do?
Yeah, look, the foundation came up where, as without getting into the details, we hit a lot of roadblocks around how when we drew a line in the sand around commissions, we said that we weren't going to accept them. There were product providers, due to the nature of the industry, that were still paying them, and we said, right, well, we'll rebate what we can rebate to clients, but administratively some other little bits and pieces got too hard, and it ended up, for the long and the short of it, we said we're going to donate it. And but that whole community framework was great in the sense that we wanted to support South Australia, we wanted to support children's and the disadvantaged, and we wanted to help charities that weren't necessarily going to, well, they didn't have the marketing machine, I'll call it, to go and raise their own money. Some foundations are small, but they do some really worthy stuff. Yeah. And that was where we started. And I'm really proud of what we've achieved there in a sense that we've now not only donating probably between $60,000 $70,000 a year to those charities, and have donated well in excess of probably $500,000 over the journey so far, but more importantly, we have this inch wide, mile deep sort of philosophy with these charities where we understand where the money's going. We get involved ourselves. And, for those that, I do this silly 700-kilometre bike ride for Operation Flinders up to the Flinders Ranges, where we are really trying to live in those charities as much as we can. And so we introduced the volunteer days at work, which was great. We gave every one of the staff members a paid day off to go and help out one of these charities. And the last piece of the puzzle now is getting the clients involved and with philanthropy. And it's something that, it's funny, I think Australians do it okay. I think Americans are much better at philanthropy than we are, but that's one thing that they have over us probably at this stage. But
it might not be too many others.
No, yeah, that's right. But connecting our clients or our client base with the foundation is something, is a work in progress. And I'm really enjoying working with the foundation.
Aside from the market challenges and things like that, what other challenges through business have you faced going through business that have had a real impact on you, and how have you navigated through them?
Yeah, look, this one was a really interesting one for me, is that I do, and if there are people out there listening that know me quite well, they'll know that we all make mistakes, that we all genuinely do things that in the heat of the battle that you go, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But being able to then be mentored, talked to, given other chances, believed in. So I faced obstacles, but I think that it's the way that people have supported me through those obstacles, which has really been important in my career, and it's shaped who I am today. And I love my father-in-law's statement all the time that no bugger's perfect, and he'll laugh when he hears me say that. But it was just really interesting going through some of those things in my career, and they definitely and also culturally, growing up in the stockbroking industry, you can imagine, you hear what you see in the movies with the Wolf of Wall Street and stuff, and a lot of people go, nah, that would never happen. Yeah, there's some cultures in some of those industries you sit there and you shake your head at, and again, I'm not saying they're good or bad, but they were there, and you reflect, you watch, and there are some things you like and there's some things you don't, and that shapes who you are today.
No, thanks for sharing. What about some of the goals, mate, that you've set yourself that you're yet to accomplish?
This is a really interesting one for me, Andrew, because I had to think long and hard about this, but probably the one that I wrote down here is, and it's not even related to my career, it's more related to my desire to want to, I love baseball, for those that don't know, and I really...
Hence Moneyball,
but I really would still have this passion one day to be a high level, whatever that means, a baseball coach.
Mm-hmm.
I still, obviously time commitments with work get in the way now, but it is something that I still hold a passion for, and that whole coaching element around how to help kids and how to establish coaching frameworks and help mentor other coaches and other things like that is really something that I haven't been able to really turn my attention to in any major way, but I one day I'll certainly circle back to that part of my life. And other than getting my golf handicap under 10 again, is something that I really want to do.
Very good. Do you have a life motto?
Yeah, it's funny. And again, another, the baseball club will laugh when I mention this one. Probably the motto I mentioned earlier is, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. And I have lost count of how many times I've said that to myself, and I've said that to people, because people often complain about things. They complain about things that are happening to them, and yet they still repeat the same behavior and then complain about the same outcome. And it is the definition of insanity. And I absolutely, I can't, you can't phrase it any other way other than to say that change something. And yes, if you change something, you still might not get the outcome you want, but at least it's cause and effect. Change it, get a different outcome. Okay, I didn't like the outcome, change it again. Keep going until you get the outcome that you want, but don't stand still and don't accept what you're getting, change it.
Yeah, and that sort of circles a little bit back to, some of your early learnings and stuff like that, and probably some of the teachings or mentoring that you got from your dad. So, well, you're responsible for your own outcomes. No one else is responsible for how you feel or how you react or what happens to you. And it's like that locus of control, internal versus external locus of control.
Take ownership over it, own it, be accountable for it. Maybe don't complain about it, but we're all entitled to a whinge every now and again. But
what about a mentor? Do you have a mentor or a coach or a group of mentors that you work with?
It's a really interesting question, and I do probably I think about this a lot. And again, it probably goes without saying, in my life, my dad was a mentor to me. He ran a successful practice. He had a lot of love and admiration in the community for what he did at various levels. And Dad passed away when he was 57. He was had a heart attack, and what I really struggled with then was who is my mentor now. And ultimately, the best bit of advice I got given was, don't go looking for a replacement for your father. Go and take what you liked and what his mentorship meant to me, and go find that quality in other people. And if you found it in person A, B, or C, or C, D, and E, great. You then just draw on that when you need it. And it took me a couple of years to figure that out, and I felt a little bit lost through that phase. But once I figured out and got my mojo back with that again, and stopped looking for a unicorn, and saw it for what it was certainly refreshing. So the short answer to the question is, I've got multiple things I look for in different people.
Yeah, okay. And from what I understand, you're also part of like a tech group, which I presume provides some of that support, and I presume there's probably some people at the baseball club that you catch up with and share ideas with as well. So.
Yeah, no, and the tech group with the business side of it, and and I've always called the baseball club my church, or my sanctuary. That's my spirituality in a way. I'm not a religious person, but we all have our own religion in a way, and it's like Cheers. When everybody where everyone remembers your name or whatever it is when he walks in. That's what I love about things like the baseball club, and and you walk in and you go, yeah, I feel comfortable here, and I don't have to pretend to be anybody else. I don't have to be anything. I can just be me, and there's a lot of solace in having those things in your life.
Comes back to the comment earlier about being genuine and not having to fake anything.
Yep, correct.
Cool. Thank you, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Cheers. Appreciate it. Hi, I'm Tony Catt, CEO of Catapult Wealth. Thanks for joining us on the Little Black Book podcast today.